Talk Like an Egyptian, a podcast about ancient Egypt with Dr. Chris Naunton and Izzy Lawrence. In this episode, we give a little overview of pyramids. Who built them, why they built them, where they built them, and why did they stop? Hello and welcome to Talk Like an Egyptian, where we discuss ancient Egypt. And by we, I mean me, Izzy Lawrence, author and broadcaster. And then if you have a look over there, if you're watching on the internet, if you're not watching, if you're listening, you can almost hear him. It is Egyptologist Dr. Chris Naunton.
Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to the podcast.
That is so the most deadpan way of introducing yourself.
Yeah, God, I sound boring, don't I? Don't switch off, everyone. It gets more interesting.
It does. Well, we're going to get interesting this week because we're talking about our favourite shapes as Egyptologists. Yeah. This is. We're just going to talk about shapes. If you're a fan of Doritos, if you're a fan of Dairy Lee, they're not sponsors of this podcast, but any sort of triangle-based thing.
That's all I eat. Dairy Lee triangles, Toblerones, and Doritos. That's all I eat.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You and Darth Vader, I think, same shaped mouths. But yes, so basically we are talking about, because I think if you go to almost anybody, even a 4-year-old, right, you say, can you tell me something about ancient Egypt? The first word that comes out of their mouth is pyramid. That is what the ancient Egyptians are famous for.
Yes.
Mainly the pyramids of Giza. Take it away. Where are we going to start with pyramids?
I suppose we kind of have to start with Giza, do we? Because when people think of pyramids, the pyramids, I suppose most people have got in mind Giza, even though there were lots of pyramids in lots of other places. And actually, the pyramid is not just all Egyptologists' favourite shape, but we've dealt with this in the previous episode. It's one of those motifs that recurs in Egyptian architecture, even when we're not actually talking about a pyramid like what the ones at Giza are like. So we should probably just embrace Giza to start off with, because that is what people will know.
Because they are massive and they're really old.
Yes.
They're in the first bit, which I believe you call the Old Kingdom.
Old Kingdom, yeah.
Old Kingdom, because it's old.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
old.
Yeah.
And in our mummy episode, we talked about Imhotep. So, I mean, I've just gone, I just said, we're starting with Giza, and then I've just gone Imhotep at you. So
no,
I've already
that's
ruined
an equally good starting point, actually. While the pyramid is a motif that recurs throughout ancient Egyptian history, the pyramids, the monumental, massive pyramids that were built as part of the tomb complex of the king, they are confined actually to two periods. One being the Old Kingdom, which is 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th dynasties. The second period, and it's much less well known. There's then a break. We've got one of our what we call intermediate periods, when everything goes a bit pear-shaped.
There's no king.
There were kings, but more than one.
Yeah.
And the country sort of splits. So there was a much less powerful individual over here sort of going, I'm the king, but only of this area, and somebody else in a different part of the country going, no, I'm the king, but only of their local area. So that's a sort of intermediate period where we don't have centralized administration, and Egypt is therefore less rich and less powerful. So the Old Kingdom is followed by the first intermediate period gap in pyramid building. A period of central administration and a rich and powerful Egypt returns under what we call the Middle Kingdom, second half of the 11th dynasty, 12th dynasty, maybe a little bit of the beginning of the 13th, if you want to see it that way. And pyramid building returns as the mode of marking the burial of the king at that time. So the very first one was built on behalf of the first king of the 3rd dynasty, first king of the Old Kingdom, more commonly known in his day as Netriket, but more commonly referred to since that time as Djoser. And it's that pyramid, Djoser's pyramid, the step pyramid, that was the first monumental building built of stone in Egypt, and it's also the first pyramid.
And possibly designed by Imhotep, who doesn't look as good as he does in the mummy, probably.
We don't have any evidence from Imhotep's own lifetime that he was the inventor or designer or whatever. Most of the evidence we have for him, if not all of it, answers on God, please. Most of the evidence we have for Imhotep comes from in or around close to the Step Pyramid. So he was, it's clear that he was around.
He was hanging out there.
It's only much later that Manetho tells us that he was what Manetho says in English translation is he was the inventor of building in hewn stone. And as the pyramid is the earliest building we have evidence for that was built in stone, we can also assume, if Manetho was right, that he's the inventor of pyramid building.
Now, my understanding of pyramids and where they come from, okay?
Yeah.
And this is Izzy's understanding of things that she has read and listened to, which might not be bang on, so correct me. But my understanding is that basically, for ages, people were just buried in sand, and then sometimes the sand dunes would move, and so you'd see these dried out people, and you'd think, oh, look, they still look like they might be alive. Oh, actually, if we've got life after death, let's make our, graves a little nicer. So we make our graves a little nicer, and we build little stone sort of things around the graves, and we sort of carve them out of a cave or something like that. And oh dear, the bodies rot, so we're going to have to mummify them a little bit. Okay. But what we're going to do is decide that my grave's a bit more important than your grave. I'm just going to put like a stone on top of it, like a really big thick stone to show how important I am. And then my mate over here is going, actually, I'm more important than you, so I'm going to just put another stone on top of that. And these little stones, these sort of like benches, were called mastabas, which literally I think is Arabic for bench. And then basically what happened was, at some point, Joseph just went, do you know what, guys? I can outdo this. We can have the biggest stone on stone on stone on stone. And the reason they're pyramid shaped is simply so they don't fall over. How right is that as an
And that's the end of today's episode, folks. Thank you very much, Izzy. Thank you for listening. See you next time. No, that was very good. I was just thinking, how can I sort of say, yes, that was very good without just repeating what you've said?
That's kind of like the basic thing, but obviously the design of things like, the pyramids of Giza are a lot more elaborate, and you do have them like coated in stuff, and you do have all of this other stuff going on, and the whole temple complex, the fact that this is just one part, I think really we need to sort of like, why are they building these things? Is it just outdoing your neighbours? And the stupid thing about putting your body in a massive thing that says, rob me. So
yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. So yes, you're right. There is a bit more to unpack. Just a couple of sort of clarifying points on where we've got to so far. So yeah, absolutely right. In the earliest times, burials are very simple, shallow graves in the desert. That seems to have been the first sort of thought. If you're going to do anything other than just leave a dead body lying there to rot, cover it with some sand at least. These become more elaborate. And people the important thing is that they start to heap material, mixture of sand and stone perhaps, over the top. So there's a kind of a marker, I suppose, at that point. You're not just putting them into the ground and covering it over so nobody can see. There's a kind of a marker. These come to be built up actually after fairly early on in the sort of process, in the sequence of development. They come to be built up not with more stone, but with mud brick. Mud brick, we should remember, even though it's the stone buildings, temples and tombs that have survived best to us, and so they're the most famous and the most spectacular and the buildings we all know best, the default building material for the Egyptians, the one that they would have used by far and away more than any other, is mud brick. These are simply made with mud of varying composition from the banks of the river, put into rectangular molds and then allowed to dry in the sun. So they're very, very easy to make.
They're often mixed with hay and things as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the composition changes. So depending on composition of the mud and the silt that you get, you might get a slightly different effect. And yes, you're right. They did eventually add things like straw in varying sort of proportions. They're easy to make. They're easy to move around as well. If you think stone, particularly large stone blocks, extremely difficult to transport, and you have to go to the right quarry to do it. Whereas mud bricks can be made more or less anywhere there's water and mud, anywhere in the country. They can be made into whatever sort of shape you want. They settle on a certain approximate size after a while.
What sort of size is that? Are we talking like a red brick? Or are we talking breeze block? What are we talking?
So it varies. They can be as small as the sorts of red bricks that would be used to build houses in this country, in Britain. They get up to more like sort of a foot and a bit long, something like maybe 15 inches. The biggest ones can be quite big, and actually they are quite heavy. It's quite surprising, actually. And in fact, although we keep saying that, it's stone, that's the durable material, stone that survives, because Egypt is so dry, and actually mud bricks are, in fact, themselves, they're not as durable as stone, but they're still pretty durable. They do survive incredibly well. I'm slightly off on a tangent here. One of the main reasons why mud brick hasn't survived so well is that people began to realize, particularly in the 19th century, actually in modern times, that if you crumble up a mud brick and sprinkle it onto your fields, it's very good fertilizer. So masses and masses of the archaeology of ancient Egypt was lost in the 19th century in particular, as the population began to expand and people thought, all this load of fertilizer here. But this was unfortunately the evidence of ancient Egyptian civilization. Anyway, so these simple mounds built over or piled up over people's bodies, we call these tumulus, in the singular tumuli, graves. Those come to be built up with mud bricks, and rather than being a sort of a mound shape, you start to get straight-sided buildings of mud brick built over the top of the graves. And these were called by Egyptologists mastabas.
And are they like little temple-y type things? Would people go inside them, or are they just there to mark what's now?
No. So they vary in design. There comes so I could fast forwarding sort of through time here. The very largest of them are absolutely enormous. They're sort of 10 or 20 meters high, and they can be 50 or so meters along the longer edge and say 20 or 30 meters along the shorter edge. Rectangular platforms. They are huge, the biggest ones. And internally they vary. They are sometimes more or less completely solid, but usually, or often, you've got compartments within them for the burial itself of the body, but also grave goods and perhaps in some cases other members of the family, or that kind of thing. So they can be quite internally quite complex, but there's absolutely no sense that there's an entry and exit point. They're meant to be completely sealed once the burial is made and everything's finished. They would incorporate, usually at the southeastern corner on the eastern face, some kind of ritual place. Usually this is the point
shelf
where there would be usually it would be what we call a false door. So it would be symbolically a door, a kind of way in and out, but it's a way in and out for the spirit of the deceased to go in and out of the tomb. So it's not an actual door. And this is in the more kind of developed form. And those, for the purposes of the people still in the mortal world, this would be the place where you would go, remember the individual. They would often have, name and titles and short offering inscription. This is in later times when these come to be sort of more developed.
Close back in 5 minutes sign, that sort of
thing. Gone out to visit family. And this is where you might place offerings. But that would be the extent of it. That would be, as a visitor, that's where you would go. You wouldn't expect to go inside. Okay. So what happens at a certain point at the beginning of the Third Dynasty in the reign of Djoser is, and kings come to be buried in this way as well, with these mastabas. Oh yes, and you're quite right, by the way, that word. So it's Egyptologists who find these things and think, well, it looks like one of those benches what they have outside houses. Egyptian traditional houses in modern times incorporate a bench outside. You'll still see these today. Sometimes they're wooden benches. This is where the people who live in the house will sit during the day, while away the time, chat, speak to passers-by. Sometimes those are wooden benches, but sometimes, more traditionally, they're made of mud bricks and plastered and painted. And they just take the form of a rectangle. So this is what the Egyptologists saw. They saw those benches. What's the name for that? Mastaba. Oh, right. Let's call these tombs Mastaba tombs. So kings are buried in, or beneath these things as well. And in the reign of Djoser, like every good king, he's going to have a monumental tomb for himself built. So he starts to build his Mastaba tomb. For some reason, presumably, if Manetho was right, it's at the suggestion of Imhotep. They say, let's just try something different. Why don't we build the platform, the mastaba, but let's build another platform a little bit smaller on top of it. How's that? Like a 2-level platform. Amazing. Actually, why stop there? Why not do one platform, then another one, then another one, and then another one? And eventually there's, I forget, half a dozen or so. Actually, there were several sort of changes of plan. I think we can see 3 sort of phases of design But eventually, of course, those smaller and smaller and smaller platforms eventually reach up almost to a point, and suddenly, hey presto, you've got a pyramid sort of shape, a step pyramid. And they were building in stone. They had taken this decision that we're going to build in stone. Well, we can do this now. Our engineering techniques are sufficient. We think that we can pile a load of stones on top of one another, and they won't all just collapse and fall in a heap. We reckon we can do it.
Is it the case of the fact that, maybe they thought that the mud brick might actually crumble at the bottom and maybe the stone is stronger for that reason? Because obviously, mud brick is very strong, but if you got that much on top of it, the very bottoms could, you're risking more collapse than you would with stone, I would imagine. But maybe it was an engineering thing as well that they were thinking.
I think difficult to know. It's worth pointing out that in the Middle Kingdom, those pyramids come to be made of mud brick.
Okay.
So with a layer of stone on the outside, and those are still standing.
Ooh. So mud brick is very strong then.
So it is, but it's also lighter, of course, than stone. So I suppose the thing we can say for sure is that they're innovating. They're having ideas about, building bigger, building higher, and building in stone, which makes things more durable. It may have been that they were concerned about weight and distribution. It may also have been that mud brick was easier for robbers to get through, and they thought, if we build in stone, there's no way the robbers are going to get in.
Which brings us into what's inside them. Yeah.
It does. You're quite right. So, again, following the sort of evolution of the mastaba tomb design, you've got the burial of the body itself, and that is the most important thing. That's the thing they really need to protect. Basically, beneath the platform, the mastaba, either more or less at the bottom of it or just slightly sunk into the ground, or in some cases at the bottom of a shaft. You might get a shaft going further down into the ground. And pyramids basically follow this idea. So in the case of the step pyramid, what you have is actually an extraordinary, very deep, very large shaft going down, I don't know exactly how far down, a few tens of meters, let's say it's 40 or 50 meters down into the ground, into the bedrock, with a burial chamber at the bottom built of massive stone blocks with huge stone blocks across the top as a kind of ceiling, but with a circular hole in it. And the body and all the grave goods would be introduced into the chamber via this circle. And then there's a huge plug, essentially a sort of cylindrical stone that goes into that circular opening to seal it. And then the shaft is completely filled with stuff as well all around it. So the burial chamber made of stone is completely buried. And then you've got a pyramid over the top of it.
And that pyramid is solid?
That pyramid is completely solid. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Completely solid.
Seems excessive. It does seem excessive.
Maybe they were already so concerned with tomb robbery. They decided we are absolutely not going to allow this pyramid to be robbed. We've got to do whatever we can. We're going to go very deep. There's going to be a stone chamber. It's going to be completely buried, blah, 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 blah. And it still didn't work, of course. It still got robbed.
Oh, good on those robbers. That is
I know, they were good.
A lot of work.
They were good.
I mean,
yeah.
Okay, how on earth did the robbers get in then? Did they build another tunnel and come in into the corner, or did they?
Yeah,
or
so
you don't know with that one.
The step pyramid. No, they did cut tunnels. So the step pyramid, if you see it in either in sort of plan or ideally kind of sort of 3D reconstruction of not only the shaft, there's a network of tunnels and chambers all the way around it. It's insanely complicated. It's worth saying actually that pyramids are, I think I'm probably right in saying, never as complicated as this again, certainly not for centuries. And the complexity is partly the design, but it's also partly secondary passageways cut for robbers as well. I mean, I've been down into those passageways a couple of times for the TV cameras, and in fact, in one case, was trying to guide a presenter around and got lost, which the TV kind of loved. That was exactly what they wanted. But I did get a lot. It was kind of funny, but yeah, I mean, it really is properly labyrinthine down there.
That's There's this thing about the British Museum where they don't actually have plans for all of the tunnels below the British Museum, because obviously they keep a lot of things which aren't on display. And some of it's very valuable. A lot of it's human remains and has to be treated very respectfully and everything else. But literally, I have been lost in those little tunnels underneath the British Museum for a bit and just going, only for like, a minute. I'm just going, actually, I don't know the way back. Oh no. And the fear. And that's got lighting. So I can't imagine what it's like in an actual pyramid.
I should say these days there is electric lighting. These
days there's lighting. Okay,
in the in the Step Pyramid also. We should say what happens after this. So for the rest of the Third Dynasty, actually we're slightly in the dark on burials of pharaohs. We don't have very much remaining. There was at least one more pyramid planned, pyramid of a pharaoh called Sekhemkhet. We can see the beginnings of the pyramid complex, which is actually very close to the Step Pyramid complex at Saqqara, but the pyramid itself, it seems, was never really built. The next sort of substantial remains we have are either from the reign of a king called Huni, slightly later on in the Third Dynasty, or Sneferu at the beginning of the Fourth. And Sneferu had, depending on whether you attribute a pyramid at a place called Meidum to him or not, maybe it's Huni, he had perhaps 3 goes at building a pyramid, and we can see from those 3 that again there's a rapid process of innovation going on here. And they're building in stone, they're building pyramids. That's now de rigueur, and they are trying to build bigger and bigger. They're also, though, having to deal with the fact they're trying to incorporate chambers within the pyramid itself. And that gives them a problem because of the mass of stone, the sheer weight of stone. If you try and create a cavity inside that, with all that huge quantity of stone around it, it starts to push in on that cavity, and you get the danger of collapse. So they have to figure out a clever way of arranging the stone so that the forces of the weight of the stone are distributed cleverly around these chambers.
So is one of Sneferu's ones that really bent pyramid?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yes. So we refer to it as the bent pyramid.
It is very funny if you look at it.
Yeah, so called because its sides at the bottom, in the bottom half, are very, very steep. It's worth saying the bent pyramid is absolutely enormous. At this point, they are approaching the size of the Giza pyramids, which are the biggest there ever were. And in fact, Giza is where we're going next after Sneferu. So we're very close to the peak of pyramid building at this point. So the bent pyramid is huge. The sides are very, very steep at the base. In fact, so steep that if they continued on that angle, it would have been ludicrously tall. So they have to change the angle of inclination towards the top to be a gentler kind of slope. And this gives it this so-called bent appearance. But nonetheless, they finish it. Well, they pretty much finish it. It is huge, and it incorporates chambers within the structure. There are signs that it was maybe starting to collapse. It didn't, and you can visit those chambers now. You can go to the site. It's at a place called Dashur. You can go to the site and buy a ticket and go inside. It's a bit of an adventure. It involves a bit of sort of crawling here and there and up some steep wooden walkways that have been installed, modern things. But anyway, they obviously decided that they wanted to have another go. And so at the same site, Dashur, a kilometre or so to the north, the other thing I should say is that they're trying at this point to get away from the idea of stepped pyramids to true straight-sided pyramids. And that's really hard to do also. A step, when you've just got one platform on top of the other, that's much easier. The last in the Sneferu sequence, the first one is maybe at Meidum. That's a sort of step pyramid, but with straightened out sides. You then get the bent pyramid, which probably goes a bit wrong, looks a bit strange, maybe was collapsing.
And what we say goes a bit wrong, is that the one with all the cedars of Lebanon in it holding it up, and they've basically put a load of beams in its side? Yes,
exactly. There are beams inside. Yeah, it's still there. Yeah, sort of holding the
walls in.
The sides of the walls of the chamber from collapsing. Yeah, don't think too hard about that if you go and visit.
I know that's what is this thing of just going, well, it's held up this long. There's a few. I think I can't remember which church it is. There's a cathedral somewhere in the UK which has, like, one of the first ones which has this purely sort of like really thin, like only a couple of inches, stone perfect ceiling, which looks absolutely beautiful. And you can stand on it. I wouldn't, but you can stand on it. Because you're like 100 meters up, and you're just like, how on earth is this working? Because it is just stone, and you're just like, and you see historians get down on it and go, this is fine. And you're just like, no, it's not.
Yeah, it might not be. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah, I think just don't think too hard about these things.
Yeah. Okay.
So Sneferu has one more go. He builds the bent pyramid, probably begins to collapse. They have to make it look weird on the outside. He has one more go, and this is a pyramid we refer to as the Red Pyramid because the limestone it was constructed from has a kind of golden, yellowy, almost reddish appearance. They nail it. At this point, they nail it. So it is the largest ever constructed up to this point. By volume, I believe it's the second largest of all time. It's true straight-sided, and it incorporates chambers within the structure. And this also features a technique of laying large stones in an overlapping manner. It's called corbelling, which creates internally these incredible spaces with a kind of big, like pitched roof, like very, very high chambers.
I've done it with beer mats. That's what
you might have done. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. If you're in a pub with the old sort of cardboard beer mats and you sort of stack them so that they sort of go off at an angle, and you sort of do that balance thing of how far, along can you balance them before they tip over.
Okay.
As a little thing.
Yes.
It's a bit like corbelling. I don't know if anybody else has done that.
Yeah, so it's the same sort of thing, exactly. So you've got to get your angles right and you've got to get your overlaps right to allow the forces to go in the ways that you want without bringing about collapse one way or another. And they nail it. So Sneferu, not terribly famous in the grand scheme of things, but he's the one, or it's during his reign that the technique is perfected. So who comes next? It's Khufu, or to give him the Greek form of his name, Cheops, who decides to move the site of the cemetery from Dashur northwards to a place called Giza and builds his pyramid there. And he takes Sneferu's innovations and goes one better, and this is absolutely what everybody wants to do at this point. So Khufu builds his pyramid at this new site of Giza. It's the biggest there's ever been, approximately 150 meters tall. It's a true straight-sided pyramid. He takes this idea of chambers being inside the structure of the pyramid even further. So his is it's a long way sort of further into the mass or higher up into the mass of the structure, I should say. He's pushing the envelope of what's possible at this point. And his burial chamber is right in the middle, and it's a fantastic success. And that is the pyramid that is the largest, the most precisely constructed. The right angles at the corner of the bases are more perfect, even despite the sheer massive size of this thing. More perfect, I gather, than they would need to be in building houses in modern times today. It's an absolute marvel of engineering.
Right, I'm just imagining you've built your pyramids, right? You are Khufu, you built your pyramids, and you die. And then you have this big ceremony where your body is taken across the Nile on this ship, and the ship is buried, and all these things happen. And then some poor sod has got to try and get your body inside the burial chamber, which presumably there isn't going to be a direct path straight into it, is there? I mean, how do they get the body from the outside of this thing? Because before, when I was thinking about the step pyramid, I suddenly realised, oh, of course, the step pyramid's there, and they've got to get down that shaft with the body as well, and then put the plug in, and then get up, and then fill it in, whilst the pyramid's above them the entire time. And this time, they've got to get the body into the pyramid. I mean, it just seems hard, I think is the word I'm looking for. Hard.
The thing that is most difficult to get into the space, whatever your space is, whether it's a pyramid or a rock cut tomb or a shaft or whatever, the thing that the most difficult item to maneuver into the space is the sarcophagus, given that the Egyptian tradition, well established at the time, by the time of Khufu already, is for large stone sarcophagi to be the thing into which the body is placed. By the way, it's a kind of convention in English language Egyptology that sarcophagus refers to the stone box, but usually the body would be placed inside a wooden or sometimes cartonnage coffin inside the stone sarcophagus. So I think probably what the process would have been is that the sarcophagus is almost certainly introduced into the tomb before the death as part of the construction process, whereas the body would be brought in inside its coffin, and that would be much easier to maneuver than the sarcophagus, which is much bigger and heavier. So you can imagine in the case of the Pyramid of Khufu, where there is still present in position a granite sarcophagus in the burial chamber, that might well have been put there before the pyramid was fully built. So in other words, it didn't have to come in via the network of quite tight, steep passageways that lead a person up into the burial chamber now. The other thing, though, to say is that it's beyond any doubt that the pyramid wasn't finished at the time of Khufu's death. And that, in fact, that was probably quite common. So, pharaohs embark on these, particularly at a time of... I'm
going to live another 40 years.
Exactly. So pyramids don't go up in sort of, a month. They take years, they take decades, in fact. And we don't know how long, but we can sort of estimate based on, let's say, total number of stone blocks, how long it takes to maneuver an individual block into position, how many blocks you could have on the go at once, and you can sort of run the calculations. It's maybe 20 years in the case of the Khufu pyramid, maybe more, and you can argue about that. We can't know for sure, but that's a safe sort of bet. So first of all, any royal tomb would almost certainly be one of, if not the single most important construction project for every king. And it would be very close to the top of their priorities when they come to the throne in the first place is, right, let's get on with it. They would have been, depending on the age they are at the time they inherit the throne, aware that, of course it's in the hands of the gods, but, they might not have very long. They might be on the throne for 50 years, or they might be on the throne for 50 days. Anyway, got to get on with it. But when you've got these vast construction projects like the Khufu pyramid, you've got to hope, if you're going to embark on something like this, that you're going to be alive. If you want to see it finished, you're going to have to be alive and on the throne for at least a couple of decades. But we know absolutely for certain that Khufu's successor's name is present in parts of the pyramid complex. We understand that to mean that these were finished off by Jedefra is his name.
Yeah. Jedefra was here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
this block, courtesy of Jedefra's men. There we go.
Yes, and that would have been probably quite normal practice. So another thing that you've got to do when you come to the throne, apart from sorting out your own tomb, is quite possibly sorting out your predecessors as well.
Jedefra, did he do the next one then? Is he the next big one then? Why isn't it bigger than Khufu's? Because Khufu's still the biggest one of the three, isn't it? That are in Giza. So why isn't... Well, obviously there are more than three because there's the little ones as well, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, no, there are. So good question. I feel like part of the answer to this actually lies in something else that we should talk about at some point, which is that the pyramid itself is part of a pyramid complex. So when you're building the tomb, let's call it, the whole thing comprises, yes, the pyramid with all of the chambers that might be in, or in fact more usually underneath the pyramid. But then there's also associated buildings with that, mostly cult and associated buildings, religious buildings. And these are all connected to one another and partly enclosed within a walled area sometimes, or at least a kind of clearly demarcated area. Park that thought for one moment. You're right. Khufu's is the biggest, most precisely designed, and the most spectacular in terms of the presence of the burial chamber within the structure, as far into the center of the structure as it is. After this point, they revert to burial chambers. It's sometimes called the cut and cover method, where basically you cut down, first of all, into the ground, into the bedrock, and your burial chamber is going to go there, and then you build a solid pyramid over the top. So you don't have to worry about this problem of coming up with complex arrangements of stone to prevent your burial chamber from collapsing. You just forget that, too difficult. You just put it under the ground and then build a solid pyramid, which is much easier to achieve. So those two things are happening. Pyramids are never as big again, and they're never as complicated internally again. And why was this? Well, again, we can't know this. We don't have an inscription that says. And the next time we tried, we decided to change our plan.
We had such a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. We really need that papyrus one day, maybe. But we can deduce from what happens that most probably, much as it was an incredible achievement, not of the king, but of the Egyptian state to build this thing. Not just because of the incredible design, and not just because it's really big and precisely constructed, and not just because the blocks are humongous. They're enormous. They're sort of the size of your garden shed, some of them. How did they even do that? How did they even move them? The thing that's easy to forget is that in order to do this, you can't just go down to the market one day and say, look, lads, I'm building a pyramid. I could use some help. You need to organize thousands of people, all with different skill sets and huge quantities of resource coming from all over the country. So as much as having loads of really strong guys with loads of rope to pull huge blocks all the way from a quarry, quite possibly across the river, down the river to the site, pull them up, get them into position, all of that. You've got to have really good administrators bossing everybody around and saying, all right, okay, so that's the 100,200 block to go in. We're going to need another 10,000 blocks. Can you go to the quarry and get them to... the administration that's required for that is, for me, as boring as it sounds, is maybe actually the great achievement of the pyramid building. And of course, even if they don't do pyramids again, that administration allows Egypt to be run fantastically efficiently. And that in some ways is its superpower. So why did they get smaller? Well, most probably, it seems to me, the most likely explanation is people just went, I just don't think we should do that again. Oof, it was too much. It was too much hard work. It took too long. We don't need it to be that big.
It's not respect for the great king, maybe.
Yeah,
it's just like, I don't want to be bigger than you, Daddy. Was it his dad? I don't know.
It's much more an Egyptian thing to want to and to say that you are doing things bigger and better than ever before. Well, what happens is they do get smaller, they get less complex, but other aspects of the burial come to be more complex. Certainly as you get into the 5th and 6th dynasties, you get an increasing complexity of associated temple buildings. So it may well be that they just decided, look, in order to guarantee the king's passage to the afterlife, a pyramid is required. It doesn't have to be the biggest one of all time. It just needs to be quite big. And meanwhile, we really need to have a lot of cult buildings and loads of beautiful reliefs showing and text showing what happens. That's what we need to concentrate on now. We need to get the sculptors in and the priests and the learned people in to tell us what inscriptions we need to put on the walls. That's going to take ages. If we're going to do that, there's no way that we can carry on building massive pyramids. We've done that. We just have a quite big one, but really beautifully decorated with elaborate cult buildings.
Could it also be that it was understood that they were going to get robbed and it was kind of accepted? And so, because I've read in various, I can't remember which dynasties it is, but they start to, this is before the Valley of Kings, but they don't actually bury themselves in the pyramid anyway. And so they bury themselves in the complex somewhere else. And then the actual pyramids might not be, but it is just for show, and they've got a little place for themselves. Is that right? Have I completely made that up in my head? You're looking like I'm mad. I might be mad, guys. I'm not an academic. But I thought that might be a thing.
No, they are mostly buried more or less. What happens in, say, the Middle Kingdom in the 12th dynasty is that you get a pyramid, and then underneath you've got a quite complicated network of tunnels underneath, and tunnels and chambers. The king would be buried somewhere there, but it's just not in the pyramid. It's not even immediately underneath the center of the pyramid, which is where things go after Khufu. But close enough. They're still not really in a different place. I see what you mean. And yet, if you think sort of forwards through the rest of the Old Kingdom pyramid building, into the Middle Kingdom pyramid building, and then beyond that into the New Kingdom Valley of the King's Tomb type, they are not holding back on elaborate preparations for the next life. So you don't get any sense, I don't think, of them thinking they're going to get robbed anyway. Let's just not bother. they never get to that point. They are always incentivizing robbers, basically. There's all sorts of things they could have done, you'd think, to not put nice stuff, inside the barrel. That's what the robbers are after. The robbers are after recyclable, precious stuff. It's the precious metals, and then things
Not
like oils and
the Shabty
unguents.
dolls. They might want the Shabty dolls. You could resell them.
Well, good luck going down to the market with a faience Shabty with Tutankhamun's name on and saying, "I just found it. Someone gave it to me."
Your son's called Tutankhamun, isn't he? There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Present.
Yeah. Might be another king at some point. You could probably use this.
There you go. Fair enough. Why did they eventually? Because they stopped building them because of the intermediate period, and there was no big king, so presumably organising such a big thing would have been hard anyway. But then they start again in the Middle Kingdom, and then they stop again. So why did they stop?
Well, again, actually, probably similar reasons. So yes, towards the end of the Old Kingdom, we don't fully understand the reasons why the strong and powerful central administration collapses.
Wasn't it something to do with the pharaoh being really old?
Pepi II was very old, yes, and that may have caused problems.
And did he go around trying to kiss that cat? Pepe Le Pew.
Maybe. Could we deal with that in another episode?
Fair enough.
Yeah. We'll just park that one. Yeah. We think actually that there was some kind of environmental issues at the same time. So it may be that there was some kind of successional issues, but you'd think Egypt would be able to get past that. A more kind of compelling contributing factor, I think, would be, you've got some environmental issues which most probably bring about low harvest yield, and there's some indications that there may have been famine. And once people haven't got anything to eat, you get social unrest. And Pharaoh ultimately is the guy. Something I'm not sure we've quite said clearly yet is that part of Pharaoh's role spiritually is as the representative of all Egyptian people in making offerings to the gods. So I think we did mention this very common offering formula. Hetep di Nesu is the Egyptian. We translate that as an offering which the king gives. So if you or I want to make an offering to the gods, we can sort of do that, but actually the king has to do it. So what we would do is have a little inscription that says an offering which the king gives. So we might have sort of bought the loaf of bread, but it has to go to the king, and then the king has to give it to the gods, because we can't have direct contact with the gods like that, but the king can. So if stuff starts to go wrong, like, Happy the Nile god is not happy, and the Nile flood goes wrong, it's too high or it's too low, or for some other reason the crop yields are low, people go hungry, then the king's on the hook here. Because what's he been doing? Hasn't he been making offerings? I bought a loaf of bread to offer to the gods, and still a rubbish harvest. What's the king playing at? So suddenly, people don't respect the king. They don't like the king. They want somebody else, or they want to take charge themselves, and, country fragments. And yes, you're absolutely right. What that means is that no one person, the king, has access to people and resources. No one person can say essentially to the whole country, look, everyone, you're going to have to rally round because I want a really big pyramid and I need all your help. No one's listening anymore. By the way, of course, something else that we can understand from the Pyramids age, the Old Kingdom age, is that it's not just that, they were clever at engineering and good at administration, but everybody is bought into this one way or another. Everybody is bought into the idea that the king is a god. You need to make sure that he makes it to the afterlife. In order to do that, you have to build a massive pyramid. Everyone, maybe not absolutely everybody, but a critical mass of people is bought into that idea, and that sort of myth of state, the idea of Pharaoh being at the top. And that's really easy to believe when life is good. In the Fourth Dynasty, at the beginning of the Fourth Dynasty, everybody's got enough food. There's no threats from outside. We've got a powerful army. We can defend ourselves. The sun's always shining. The Nile floods. Everything's good. The king must be amazing. So he needs a tomb. Yeah, great. Of course, we're going to build him a lovely tomb. Love that guy. He's brilliant. Complete opposite situation at the end of the Sixth Dynasty. Everything's gone rubbish. The weather's terrible. We've got marauding people maybe coming in from outside. We don't like them. The flood of the Nile's been terrible. Haven't got enough to eat. Blah, 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 blah. Pharaoh's rubbish. Don't like him anymore. So pyramid building stops. Starts again once you've got another of these instances where you've got a couple of rival lines of kings, one of them becomes powerful enough to biff the other one over the head and retake control of the whole country. Maybe by this time the sun is shining, the crop yields are good. People have started to say, well, he is from a different part of the country, but I think he's all right. He's obviously quite powerful. People have told us tales of the Old Kingdom when everything was good, so why not?
We can see the pyramids. They look amazing.
We can see the pyramid. The pyramids are lovely. Look at those massive pyramids. Have another pyramid, a new one. Wow, yeah, absolutely brilliant. As you were saying, so there's a resurgence in pyramid building, but then that also comes to an end. Again, probably similar reasons. And in fact, again, we don't know this for sure, but there's enough evidence for us to say that, again, might have been famine or might have been problems with people going hungry. You've also got invaders. At the end of the Middle Kingdom, you've certainly got large numbers of people from foreign parts, from usually described as Canaan, sort of roughly the area of what's now Israel, Palestine, Jordan, coming into Egypt and settling and being a nuisance. And that leads to another collapse in central administration. And pyramid building does continue for a bit. But again, they can't draw on the same resources. They can't draw on the same amounts of people, the same amounts of stone. So pyramids get smaller and eventually blah, 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 they disappear. And when you next get a time of re-centralization, another one of those military conquests by a particular guy who takes the country over, end of the second intermediate period, beginning of the New Kingdom, by this point, that group of kings that takes over has completely changed the way they have themselves buried. They're like, pyramids are not really our thing now. What we do is we tunnel into the rock. We have a little pyramid, but it's like it's a small one. The main thing is we tunnel into the rock and we have our tombs cut in the rock. And we're also really worried about that whole thing that you mentioned, Izzy, of the fact that if you would want your tomb not to be robbed, then one way you might do that is to hide it. And pyramids are terrible for hiding. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our pyramid far away from anywhere, hidden where no one knows where it is. Hey presto, Valley of the Kings.
Indeed. And the Valley of the Kings has that lovely sort of pyramid-shaped mountain as well. So it's kind of got one.
Oh, anyway. Yes, it does. Yeah, which sort of slightly undermines what I was just saying. But yes, you're right.
Not really, because that's like, it's just a mountain. Who knew?
Who knew?
And that's a good summary. We didn't get round to Doctor Who, the Pyramids of Mars, but we might do.
Well, we said we mentioned it and we just have. So.
I'm going to show you my little Khufu's pyramid that I've got on the table behind me as part of our bonus episode. If you want access to bonus things, please do visit patreon.com/Talk Like an Egyptian. But thank you so much for listening. Do share this with your friends. I'm going to say all this at the end anyway, so I don't know why I bother. When I listen to podcasts, I don't listen to the outro every time. It's annoying. But this is important because this is a goodbye that all ancient Egyptians, not all of them, would say to each other in order to wish you a pleasant rest of week.
That's enhanced meaning for listeners.
Exactly. So after 3, 1, 2, 3, life, prosperity, health. Thanks for listening to Talk Like an Egyptian. To support the podcast and ensure another series, join us on patreon.com/Talk Like an Egyptian and unlock bonus content. Get in touch, talklikeanegyptianpod@gmail.com or use the hashtag TLAE. We need your questions for the end of the series, so please don't hold back. Remember to leave us 5 stars of newts and share this episode with your friends. Find all links at talklikeanegyptian.com.